let's go ahead and get your starter. Here is a jar. This is why I call it the scrapings method, because all that's left is basically the scrapings from making starter and dough and bread yesterday. So I put it on the scale. I will tare it to 0. I'll add my 77 grams of water. You need to be pretty close to get your 100% hydration ratio correct, but if you're off 1 or 2 grams, that's fine. I'll use a spoon to mix it together. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can still be a little bit clumpy, but you don't want one big clump of starter in the bottom of your jar before you add the flour, so try and turn it into a bunch of little clumps. So as the water gets a little cloudier, it starts breaking up. Just give it a second, keep working it, make it into smaller clumps. This is a pretty stiff starter. It's 100% hydration. Sometimes I do a little bit stiffer even than the 100% hydration, but I am also using fresh milled whole wheat, and I have found that my starters like to be a little stiffer when using whole wheat. Okay, so now I'm going to tare it again. Now I am going to add my 77 grams of flour. Now these weights were written specifically for the sourdough loaf recipe, because once you pull out when you go to make your bread, you will have your 148 grams that you pull out of this jar, and there's enough left over to put it back in your fridge and save it for the next time you need to make your starter. So now that I have my flour in, I'm going to go ahead and move the scale out of the way and mix it all together really well. You can do this in the jar if you can get it mixed well. If you can't get all that flour mixed in, because like I said, it is on the stiffer side, you can wet your hands, pull it out, mix it in your hands, and then plop it back in your jar. Takes me a second with the spoon, so I went ahead and wet my hands. I'm going to pull it out. It just takes me a second if I have it in my hands. So pull it out. You can see it's a soupy mess, but wet hands will keep it from sticking to you a ton. Just mix it up, plop it back in, push it down so that there's no air bubbles below it. That way you get a good idea of where your level is, so you can rubber band it and then you can track your growth. You're looking for this starter to double or triple before you use it. You want it to be at its most active state, and that will be when it is at least doubled. So what you're looking for is your starter to be on the rise, growing, and not on the decline. So if you wait too long, you'll see it starts to kind of go backwards and fall back down below the level of when it doubled or tripled. And that means it's not going to be as active. So try and catch it while it's still doubling on the way to a triple when you go to use it in your dough. So I just put the lid back on, make sure my rubber band is at the right spot. So I went back and grabbed another jar that I already made out of the fridge, and you can see the one that I just made has the rubber band, and the one that I made to kind of use as an example is doubled. This one actually more than doubled, but because I wasn't using it for bread, it went up to that point, that high point, which was almost a triple, and then it started to fall back, and that means it's on the decline. So I would use this for a discard recipe, not in my bread, because you want your most active point to use in your bread, because you want the most rise out of your bread. So don't throw this away. I just have it, normally I don't have a jar of starter that I can't use this big. I just have my scrapings method, which is just a little bit left over, but because I've been making multiple jars for this tutorial, I'm just going to keep these 2 starter ones in my fridge until I'm ready to use them. I made them for this tutorial, but they're not going to go to waste. I just store them in my fridge until I'm ready to get them doubled and ready for bread. So it's a good way to kind of plan ahead with your starter. So If you guys have any questions about that, just let me know. This is kind of what you're looking for though before you make your bread. On its way up, at least a double, almost a triple.